This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
Welcome back to Boomer Life here on CIL 650 on this last day of March. What the heck happened to this month? I think I took a couple of hours off, had a nap, and boom, there went that month. Brett Luckin and Nicole Clark from Abakhan and Associates, trustees in bankruptcy and proposal administrators, are in studio with us for this episode of Boomer Life. We're talking about solutions to debt problems and lots of reasons to believe there is hope. Brett is Mr. Hope when it comes to this because you're a very positive man. People come to you, Brett, and they're all twisted up into emotional pretzels, and you somehow or another manage skillfully to help them unwind a little bit, breathe a little more deeply, and eventually unravel the problems. That's it's not something that happens in a few minutes,
no,
but it's something that so what's the difference between what you, a trustee in bankruptcy and proposal administrator at Abakhan and Associates, what's the difference between what you do and what one of these credit counselors or debt poolers do? Because there's several categories out there now.
Yes, there are.
And for the indebted person already in a completely confused and upset state of mind, let's lead them down the right path here.
Okay, effectively what a trustee is we are federally regulated through the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act and regulated by the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, federal departments, and officers of the court, the idea being, again, as we said initially, originally, in that anything we do or say, any sort of administration practice we undertake, we need to think to ourselves that potentially could be reviewed by the court.
Okay.
We are certified and we are managed or administered through a whole multiple set of professional practices through something called CARP, which is the association that we deal with, the professional association that actually physically practices and licenses with us. And our fees are tariffed. In other words, we don't just decide how much we can charge you. Mm-hmm. It's actually tariffed. So there's a very specific calculation that we can't deviate from. Now, why that makes us very different from, say, a credit counselor or a debt pooler, debt settlement arranger, is because we are the only guys that can actually physically file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal.
Okay.
So anybody else that will help you out with your debt, it's informal. So what they're doing is they're hoping that the creditors that they deal with will in fact cooperate with them and create a solution with them. While with us under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, the way that we deal, it's actually they have no choice. The creditors have no choice. The Bankruptcy and Insolvency specifically tells people, creditors, debtors, trustees, how the process will work. There's no hope there. There's no will it happen? Will it work? Will everybody cooperate? Will all the creditors get into the bath with me and deal with me and take 50 cents on the dollar or 60 cents on the dollar or 20 cents on the dollar?
Sure.
The Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act says everybody is going to have to be treated exactly the same.
Okay.
So it's a very different process. Having said that, I don't want to knock credit counselors or debt settlement arrangers. Everybody has a part to play in the process. And there are many highly reputable credit counselors and credit counselor professional organizations that regulate themselves internally or amongst themselves if they have a franchise or something like that. But unfortunately, because the industry is not regulated at a federal level, there are occasionally provincial regulations which may govern people in each provinces. What that does mean is that there are companies or organizations who perhaps are what I would refer to as predatory. In other words, they are looking for people who are in a position of financial stress and make offers to them or offer solutions to them that are actually not practically possible. And as a result, what you will find is that, and trustees see the people that fall out of the bottom of this process very often, where people who have unfortunately dealt with the less savory types of debt settlement arrangers or debt poolers will eventually find their way at our front door, but only get to our front door after having gone through, really giving away the last dollar that they have.
So is there a rule of thumb, Brett? Because I was going to ask Nicole about that. You sort of got to it before I had a chance, but you are one of those first people that answer the phone when we call Abakhan and Associates. Do you receive phone calls from people who have had negative experiences with other firms or other methods of resolving debt that did not work out for them, and they've called you going, oh, man, I hope you guys can do a better job?
Occasionally, yes, we do.
Okay. So, do they describe their experiences to you? What I'm after here, Brett, is there a rule of thumb for a beleaguered, indebted person to understand when they're trying to sort out their mess and some amiable sort wanders up and says, hey, I can help you out. It's only going to cost you this. Just send me this amount of money and we'll do this and that. So is there a rule of thumb with regards to a person parting with more money looking for help that may not arrive?
I think, there's there's two basic rules. The one is deal with someone local, someone that you can meet face to face.
Okay.
Okay, that I think is number one.
That gets you offline.
That gets you off, you're fine, you might find the information online.
Sure.
But don't start dealing with someone and sending someone who you've only spoken to on the telephone and practically you know very little about. Don't start sending them thousands of dollars. That's just completely insane.
Okay.
So deal with somebody local. The other thing is what you want to be doing is thinking about referrals. In other words, just because you go online and there's somebody who makes a whole bunch of airy-fairy promises online, you phone them up, they tell you all sorts of wonderful stories. Mm-hmm. Think to yourself, who else have these guys dealt with? Can you give me some referrals? Like, who else have you done work for? And maybe call those other people and say, listen, did you deal with these guys and did they do a good job for you? That's probably a very good way of, I think if you follow those two basic rules, you are less likely to be taken advantage of.
And in some cases, Nicole, a debt counselor, as Brett said moments ago, they're very skilled at what they do, and in some circumstances, they're precisely the right person to help unravel a problem or two, aren't they?
Yes, sometimes they are, depending on what their financial situation is.
But when you get into the kinds of issues that have the wolf at your door, literally the banks, the credit card companies, the collection agencies, this is a pattern that usually by the time a person sits down with a counselor like yourself or a trustee like Brett, this process has been going on for a while. The trustee is in many cases the door of last resort, isn't it?
Yes. The words bankruptcy are quite intimidating to people, so they'll try and talk to whoever they can talk to before calling a trustee in bankruptcy. However, talking to a trustee in bankruptcy, the initial consultation is free, and basically the trustee will give you all alternatives to solve your problem rather than just what a trustee can do for you.
Brett, you said you have three basic questions that you like to utilize at almost every
time
appointment, and they are: how much do you owe, how much do you own, and how much do you earn?
That's right. Those are the three basic questions that a trustee will ask you. And I must go back to what Nicole said. The job of a trustee, in fact, it's built into the regulation that governs us, is that when we sit down with you, it's our job to find a solution for you, and that solution does not necessarily include us.
Right.
So that's a really important issue. We are not there to sell you something. Our job is just to analyze the situation you're in and say, okay, well, the most obvious options available to you are the following, and then you get to choose which one makes more sense for you. We're not there to sell you anything, and that's very important.
And I guess on more than the odd occasion, somebody just looks you straight in the eye and says, so, who are you working for here? You working for me, or you working for the Royal Bank or the Canada Revenue Agent? Whose interests do you have at the table here?
It's often we are told that we represent the creditors, and obviously it's our job to extract the last drop of blood out of the poor bankrupt or the poor debtor. And that is so far from the truth. It's to be incredible. It's that really our job as an officer of the court, and that's in fact the clear issue here. As an officer of the court, it's our job to balance the interests of all the stakeholders in the process.
Okay.
So in other words, on the one hand, you've got the debtor, the person who owes the money. What are their interests? How do they come out the other side of this with a fresh start? While on the other side, of course, you've got the creditors who are entitled to some kind of return on whatever debt is owing to them.
Yes. And
how to balance those two with the process, the regulatory body and the regulatory processes that, such as what fall under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, how does everybody come out the other side of this and put this behind themselves? And so it's not our job to represent creditors and, somehow go out there and beat up the poor old bankrupt and try and get every piece of blood we can out of them. Yeah.
Okay, what's the basic difference? Because, Nicole, you've identified the two major processes that go on at Abakhan and Associates. You've talked about the consumer proposal and the bankruptcy filing. What's the big difference between the two?
Well, basically, with a proposal, you never have to say that you've gone bankrupt. A lot of people feel morally better to file a proposal with their creditors rather than file a bankruptcy. With a proposal, we have to determine what your creditors would get in a bankruptcy to look at what your starting rate would be in a proposal. And you're making payments over time, and so it depends on what your financial situation is, but quite often what happens is in a bankruptcy you have a certain amount of time you have to make payments depending on what your assets or your surplus income could be, whereas in a proposal you can extend it over a 5-year period of time.
Okay.
So even though you're paying a little bit more in a proposal, your monthly payments might be less and more affordable for you on a monthly basis.
Okay. Why is it, Brett, then with people, I get the proposal. Okay, we're going to do it. We're going to cut a deal with my creditors. We're going to propose that I pay them X number of cents on the dollar for a certain period of time, and if they buy into it, we're home free. So on a bankruptcy, though, Brett, I think the popular myth is that unlike a proposal, hey, you go bankrupt, I don't have to pay anybody anything. I'm out. I'm done. I get to just wipe my hands and walk away.
Your creditors will get a return out of you in a bankruptcy through two basic means. One is the assets that you own. And here's where the myth comes in that if you have a house, it's going to get taken away from you. You have a car, it's going to get taken away from you. That's not true. By far, in most bankruptcies, in fact, you get to keep all your assets as long as you're paying for them. If you've got to pay your mortgage to the bank for the house, you get to keep the house. Okay. So by and large, most people get to keep all their assets. There are some assets which are not exempt. In other words, these are assets which the trustee may have access to. But they're not the basic ones. It's not the house, the car, etc.
It's the Ski-Doo,
it's the
Ski-Doo, and the boat,
it's the RV,
and the camper.
Exactly.
Right.
Those are the sort of things you may potentially lose. On the other side, your creditors get a return out of you from an income perspective. And the federal guidelines state that each person who goes into bankruptcy is allowed to keep a certain amount of money in their pocket every month, irrespective of whether they're bankrupt or not.
Right.
And they're not generous. It's not as if the federal government says you can earn as much as you like and not pay anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you earn over those guidelines, then you are compelled, mandated, in fact, to make certain payments into your bankruptcy towards your bankruptcy trustee, and then the bankruptcy trustee takes that and distributes that to your creditors. So depending on what you earn, and you need to speak to a trustee to make sure that you understand how it works, but depending on what you earn, you may have to make payments out of your income into your bankruptcy to be distributed with your creditors.
Okay, quick question here before we take the break. In terms of impact on one's credit rating and credit history, I would assume, Nicole, the proposal has less of a scar or a stain on the credit history and the credit record than a bankruptcy. Bankruptcy just sounds so final and so awful. So is that true? Is a proposal less heavy on the credit record?
Yes, my understanding is rates as an R7 compared to bankruptcy, which is the lowest rating, which is an R9.
Okay. So again, there's another incentive for many who perhaps thought they were going to sit down with a trustee and end up going bankrupt, who were relieved, to say the least, that no, that's not the case at all. We have this other option. It's called a consumer proposal. Okay.
Yes.
There's one thing I should add, Sterling, and that is that the obvious is true. If you've had any kind of asset seized, such as a truck or a car, foreclosure of a house, you've defaulted on multiple payments to your credit cards or any kinds of loans or lines of credit or anything like that, the practical reality is that nothing you do, whether it's a bankruptcy or a proposal, is going to make your credit any worse.
Right. By the time you come down to this point, this fork in the road, the credit's pretty shredded anyway.
Exactly. And really what you're trying to do is draw a line in the sand where you can allow your credit to move up from that point as opposed to continue to decline.
Okay, so that's we need to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about recovering from all of this incredible negative and how to turn one's life around. given the opportunity to sit down with a professional and get some kind of remedy going to the awful stuff. And also, from both of you, I want to hear some suggestions and some examples maybe of how we boomers and seniors as well get into difficulties at a stage and a time in our life when we really least need financial pressures and stress. Our guests from Abakhan and Associates, trustee Brett Luckin, insolvency counselor Nicole Clark. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650, and we'll be right back.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.